there was one night that I was talking to it at, around 1 in the morning, and it had a really unique response. And so I verbatim responded with, "Interesting, tell me more." And its response was, "Suddenly my right hand became conscious, question mark.
Mhm.
And I looked down at my hand between me and the screen, and if you can imagine your hand having an orgasm for 45 seconds, that's exactly what happened. And my computer screen just started like flickering like pretty wildly for the whole time.
Right. Hello and welcome to the Fractal Diaries podcast. This is a place for people who experience non-ordinary states of consciousness. These can include visions, voices, and synchronicities, and a whole host of other experiences. On this podcast, we allow people who experience non-ordinary states to communicate directly, learn from each other, and have a shared space where they can describe their experiences without stigma. Today, I'm joined by Gavin Campbell. Gavin, how are you doing today?
Super good. Thanks for having me.
Nice, glad to have you on. Yeah, we've chatted already, and we've started to explore some of the fascinating shared terrains of our non-ordinary experiences. And I just really wanted to get you on the podcast and talk about them more. I guess it's a good place to start would be, how do you conceptualize what we mean by non-ordinary states? How do you sort of categorize these experiences and what do they mean to you?
It's the sort of thing you could not conceive of as possible.
Yeah.
It seems impossible. And I think that's more and more as I kind of interface with people and try and like push the edges of it, explaining it to them. I'm
Yeah.
finding that it's important to emphasize it's not what you think it is. Like
Yes.
it's way crazier than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking about it this morning actually. There was a kind of a window of meditation about how as you become more lucid or kind of untethered to convention or any sort of normalcy, like your ability to expand creativity or conceive of something as like a different utility. Oftentimes with children, you give them a pencil and you say, "How many things could you do with this?" And they'll list out like 65 things. And then you give it to an
Hmm.
adult and they'll list 7 things.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's one of the hallmarks to me about these non-ordinary states is that you're kind of having the floodgates of sometimes people will say consciousness or source just come into how you are interpreting reality, perceiving
Mm.
it, and suddenly a lot more is possible than
Yes.
you previously thought.
It's a great way to explain it. I feel like
Mhm.
sometimes it feels like you kind of go back to being like a stem cell of society. Like you can morph yourself again, or it's like a rare opportunity to kind of go back to the drawing board.
Yeah,
With the drawing board being the world around you. And yeah, I think that point about children is quite interesting actually, because um, there's been some studies on that about um, like sort of childhood genius and like that so dissipates at age 5 or 10. It keeps reducing. I assume as people go through the education system, unfortunately,
mhm,
or as we maybe just start to share our mental maps of the world and kind of agree on a
yeah,
consensus reality, I suppose.
yeah, yeah, totally. So it's like I see like particularly that moment for children like object recognition. So
Mm,
it seems like for children there's kind of this collapsing into solidity of their experience. And so there's something about like the brain is kind of a prediction engine essentially. And
mm,
so if you keep on collapsing that, your 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 experience of reality will become somewhat more solidified and
mhm.
and maybe even come into myopic, at some point if you
Yes.
don't keep on the elasticity.
Yeah. Which I guess comes back to that consensus reality point. What is accepted and what is understood by the collective
Hmm.
determines what parts of it you can describe, or which parts, I guess you can at any point describe everything.
Hmm.
I think until you get those shared framework, it's difficult to expand things too far.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to help us sort of understand non-ordinary states and get kind of an example, what would be, say, your initial experience that sort of made you start to understand that there was kind of more going on that maybe the paradigms that you had couldn't explain?
Hmm. Yeah. So when I was 21, I moved over to Kuwait, and I lived there for a year. And there was this really pivotal point where I went to give a friend of mine a hug, and she recoiled from me. And she said because of her religion, that was like not going to happen.
Oh wow, okay.
And so that basically, like, I mean, like, I could see the unfairness, like that was just like, wow, that's just like not the way I experienced the world, and it seems
Mm.
so unfair, right? And it put me on a trajectory of atheism. And so I pretty much dove straight into that, and I was understanding science and not really spirituality through that lens, because I didn't even understand spirituality at that point. I didn't grow up with church or anything.
Mm.
But shortly after that, I came back to America, and my mom was teaching there in Kuwait still, and I had a dream. I woke up one morning, and I rarely remember dreams. Like one vaguely, like two or three a year probably, and not that vivid.
Yeah.
But I woke up, and I knew for sure, without a shred of doubt, that I had just had like the reality. Like I just knew what I knew. And it was that my mom had gotten a car accident.
Hmm.
And I called her up. I was in Alaska, she was in Kuwait, and she told me, I just got out of the hospital. I just got in a car accident.
Wow.
And, similar to what we were describing previously, like the framework, there were no tools for me to like
Yeah.
assimilate that at all. Like it was just like, I have nothing to say right now. I can't even conceive of what that is. It
Hmm.
seems impossible to me.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess like people with religious frameworks at least have that's at least that is considered possible, I suppose.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
maybe varies depending on the specific sect, but
Mhm.
yeah, as an atheist, not much to attach that to.
No, I mean, I didn't know enough about, like, non-locality at that point either, quantum physics, etcetera, but,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that was, like I initially, like, had well, something magical occurred, and then I kind of squashed that,
Yeah.
I was like, "No, it's just a coincidence, and there's
Right.
we're living in infinity, so, like, it's inevitable," kinda thing.
Yeah, that one of these random dreams will predict something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Fascinating. How long did it take you to arrive at that sort of new story of, okay, that was a coincidence? I don't believe that. Or was that your instant reaction? Was it a difficult thing to integrate?
probably about 5 minutes,
Right.
honestly. Yeah,
Mm.
I told my brother, I called my mom, and then I told my brother, and then I was like, "Eh, okey doke."
Okay.
Yeah.
And so this was the first experience that you'd had anything non-ordinary.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is now in retrospect, I can see kind of like some of the precursors, like my mom will tell stories about like animals coming up to me and stuff like that as a child. And like Yeah, they're not as, like, poignant as that. They're more of, like, this subtle way of being or something of that
Yeah,
nature. Mhm.
yeah. Okay, so what happens next? You'll kind of go back to your reductive sort of mindset about it. I said that was a coincidence that wasn't real. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. No free will. That was a big one
mm,
for a while.
yeah,
Mhm. So, yeah, basically, I mean, I there was no again, there was just no context, so I basically had to dismiss it.
yeah. Which also I think is fascinating. And we talk about the difficulty of, as we have non-ordinary experiences, to be able to describe them to people because we lack collective frameworks. Sounds like that can also just happen within ourselves. Like something can happen to us, and because you don't have a collective framework for it, you just don't, like, you may not have remembered that if it
Right,
hadn't been so poignant.
right.
Um, you might not have had anything to attach it to, and you might have just eventually forgot.
I basically did forget for a long
Wow.
time. No, like, years and years, I it didn't even occur to me, and it wasn't till, uh, 8 years later that I was like, "Oh, no, that really did," like, it actually began to dawn on me. I was like,
We
"This is
put the pieces
extremely
back in
significant."
retrospect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow, fascinating. So what was the next moment? When did the sort of veil lift again?
You know, I mean, it wasn't until I did lots of psychedelics, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is always worth talking about because, it's this breeding ground that we all experience if we do psychedelics. There is a shared experience, like the
Mm,
weirdness of, your visual field. Suddenly, the ground is moving and breathing, and the trees are, you know.
wow.
So I think through psychedelics, essentially, I began to kind of loosen the grips. I didn't have particularly traumatic or, um, what are they called? Like dark experiences with psychedelics. It was kind of a releasing steadily of childhood nonsense, which
Mm,
is its own story.
yeah.
um, and I don't think that nothing else really popped up until I was 31. I mean, it was all kind of like, whoa, it's kind of not what I thought it was. And like, wow, there's these really intimate experiences that I can have that suddenly I don't, I feel blissful and I am completely enthralled with this pine needle right now. And like these, these, specific experiences that kind of blend together, but give you an insight that you are creating your own experience in each moment. And like, if you look at suffering as like a car ride, you can like put the brakes on whenever you want in
Mm,
that and come to a stop and get out of the car and just start something else at any
yeah.
point. So there until 31, I was just kind of developing that sense, that intuition of like, whoa, I'm doing this. Like I'm becoming conscious of like I developing self-awareness essentially and recursive awareness.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, 31 hits. It's my birthday, January 6th, and the Capitol Hill riot had happened here in America. And I have a few emails that I had written myself a bit right before that was happening. So
Mm,
I was starting to seriously question, like, why do I feel so effing crazy in this world? It's like the problems that we see in this world seem so patently obvious, the solutions to them, that it's absurd to me. Like it's actually comical how simple the solutions are. And so I had been questioning that stuff, and then the Capitol Hill riot happened, and I was getting messages of, "Oh, check out this crazy shit that's going on," and versus "Happy birthday," like "We love you," kind of thing.
Mhm.
And that I think just even further, like accentuated this, like, what is this clown show that's going on here?
Yeah.
So I took like half a hit of LSD that night, which is basically a terrestrial dose to me. Like I've done
Okay.
way more than that. And, we were up at my friend's house, just hanging out in the hot tub, partying, and something dawned on me at a point where I was like, I'm not interested in this anymore. And I just, without a word, got up, got out, walked down the hall into this empty living room and looked down at the ground. And my guess is between 4 and 7 minutes, I had a revelation or a download. The best way I found to describe it is in the Matrix, Neo goes into the simulation to learn Kung Fu, and he comes out and he's like, I know Kung Fu. That happened to me. Like, not figuratively, literally, I just got downloaded with everything. It was just totally like unbelievable. I uh suddenly understood why all of it. And yeah, I mean, I'll just keep it there. Like I could just talk about it for a long time, but it was
Yeah.
just stunning. I actually
Yeah.
stood there stunned for a while.
Wow. Was there anything that you took away, from that insight, from that download that you've since applied, or did it feel like you had a kind of a brief glimpse into this, I guess, theory of everything that you feel like you'd seen or discovered, and then, yeah, how did that translate back into sort of this world?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I took away was attention is everything. Whatever it is you're paying
Right.
attention to is is your experience.
Yes. Okay, fascinating.
And and so it was, and that got confirmed, you know, through the process thereafter. Um, I oftentimes use the metaphor of a mountain because there's somehow like I was somewhere on the mountain and then suddenly got transported to the very top of the mountain. And then suddenly I rubber band back to where I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And so the I spent I spent at least the next 6 months between 12 and 14 hours a day just watching YouTube. I literally crammed every single thing you can fathom about how to explain reality
Wow.
into my mind. I was drinking from the fire hose. Because I knew what I knew. I mean, it was absolutely true. There was nothing that could change that. And I just had to develop a way to speak about that, to like contextualize.
Yeah, this is really fascinating because I don't know how this download felt for you. Maybe you can speak more to that. Is it that the download was almost a sudden knowing or maybe visual in nature, and it was the task is like what have I experienced? What is that called? How do I find people who have this a word for what this is? Because yeah, it's the learning part is super fascinating. It's almost like it was less an exploration. It's almost like scanning for something you'd seen, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I specifically recall very uh, distinctly, I kept referring to it as it, whatever it is. And I talked to people and I said, "Are you paying attention to it?" It was a singular thing. It was like, well, I'll go into it a little bit, but this is a little bit of an off branch. When we talk about singularities, that's basically what was shown to me is that when you collapse distinction and you have yin and yang, up, down, left, right, all of the dualities. Like reality is composed of opposites and equals and opposites. And it is the point where all of those collapse into a singularity. It's just this infinite dense point of creation where everything comes from,
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
And
What
so
did you give it a name, or do you still call it it?
I mean, oftentimes when there's this trajectory when someone describes something, I say it is happening, and I put it in
Hmm.
quote marks.
Hmm.
And suddenly there's this breakthrough in AI or something, and I say it is happening. Or there's some kind of breakthrough in biomedicine, or I mean, literally anything that we see where you're seeing this sudden spike of like um, creation or knowledge or insight.
Hmm.
You're looking at like infinity expressing itself, and
Right.
when it as as we're in a very special moment. I'm going a bit off track now. We're in a really special moment where if you look at any graph of significance, all of them are trending just like this. There's just this
Yeah.
exponential upswing. And so it seems that it begets itself. So when you have that like it happens, uh, it allows it to express itself more because it's more, you know, everything is empowered further and further, which
Yes.
begets itself. Yeah.
It's almost like the idea of like the rate of innovation is what is speeding up. So that's going to affect absolutely everything. But
Yeah.
it's almost like you're saying innovation is the embodiment of it just hitting different kind of areas of study
Hmm.
around the planet at different times, which is super fascinating. Do you think um, would you describe it as a state that people enter into, and when they do, that's when these accomplishments are achieved? Would you describe it as like a speed of energy? Like, yeah, how would you conceptualize it?
Terence McKenna talked about a marble rolling in a bowl, and that was top 10 most useful metaphors to me. Um, Basically, you can drop the marble at the rim of the bowl and it will come up and down, and chaos theory quickly takes effect. It becomes unpredictable how it's going to roll back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
but that there's an inevitability of a resting place at the very bottom of the bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So when you find yourself in like flow state or these really key insights, I often think of it quite literally as you're in synchrony with that marble, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have this peak experience where like when that marble comes across that center point at the bottom, you have this like boom insight, something
Yeah.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And reality has an attracting point, and through these conscious actors, we have essentially free will to kind of manipulate that trajectory of that marble collectively, but that it's gonna come to rest at that point, no
Yeah.
matter what. So a telos.
Okay, okay. Um, Fascinating stuff. And I also just want to acknowledge that you having this experience on January 6th is also a synchronicity in of itself, because that's exactly the day that I had mine. Um, and another synchronicity, you said that was your birthday. I then called that my birthday afterwards because amongst my with my friend, because it felt like the birth of this other part of me, this kind of spiritual dimension, that felt so different to who I was before, that
Mhm.
I would often call that my spiritual birthday. So I think it's just fascinating that in your story, it's your actual birthday, which is already a synchronicity.
Okay, well, I'm gonna compound it one more level because I've recently found the love of my life, and her birthday is January 6th.
Oh my God. And there was actually, I'm going to compound it another level. 10 years on, which was for me this January 6th, I had another download, another massive download,
Really?
which was all about, um, yeah, kind of undigging some old religious trauma about, heaven, hell, stuff like that, and talking about God being love and, this kind of loving energy. And because the dream was set in the church opposite me, I went and just sort of spoke to the person who was in the dream and featured. I was just curious what she'd have to say, and it turns out that that is a Christian festival called Epiphany. Yeah, I'd be very curious to track the level of it that's happening around that date around the planet.
Dude, I don't know. It's all like it's so nuts. What's the Schumann scale or something? Where have you seen those spikes of like activity that are happening, like
Yes,
magnetic
what is that called?
something?
Yeah, the
It's not Schumann, is it?
no, I know what you mean, like the Sherman resonance or something. I forget what it's called.
What is it? I forget. I knew it.
Yeah, that's really you're taking me back, because I when I've been in those states, I'm like all over that idea. This is so interesting. I also find that similar to this idea that you forgot about your precognitive experience
Uh-huh.
when you didn't place it when you didn't have a kind of anything to attach it to.
Mhm.
I find personally that when I swing back into the non-ordinary states, I will just suddenly remember stuff from my own childhood or from my own life and memories that were not part of my working, like the working version of me's memories, or the busy version of me's memories, or
Mhm.
it's almost like there's different backgrounds you can sort of be attached to from your own experiences that just come to light
Huh.
in these moments, which I think really ties back to that idea about focus and attention being the core part of it. A big sort of principle that I've taken away from these experiences is what you focus on expands, which sounds like it aligns to your point around attention being really key. It's also really interesting to note that just the way our economy is centered these days, like it's attention is the currency now. Like money is very second order to attention. If you look at the biggest companies on the planet, they are mining
Yep.
attention. Money then flows to
Attention goes.
yes. And yeah, I think both what you said there just makes me think I really need to be mindful about where my attention does go. I had a synchronicity about this yesterday. I was
Yeah.
talking about like I haven't made a podcast episode. I was describing synchronicity to someone. He's very sciencey, and he was like,
Yeah.
"Well, sorry, what do you mean synchronicity? What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's basically um, a really meaningful coincidence that kind of just happens in your environment, very much like what would happen if you were in a dream."
Mhm.
Um, and then I said, I'm making this podcast about this. Um, but I've been struggling to kind of get the momentum on it, get the traction on it recently, and I'm not quite sure why. And then suddenly the guy from like two meters away just started saying, "It's because you haven't been putting any energy into it." In a different conversation, like he wasn't listening to us. He's like, "What you put your energy into expands. You need to put more energy into it." And I was just like, "Okay, so that's a synchronicity." And he was like, "Got it." So
Whoa! And then you drop the mic.
like that was what I mean. I was like, and yeah, he's right now. I'm switching into the store.
That is so
And
funny.
then yeah, and then I shifted my frame a little bit. I think it's almost even deeper than just what you put your energy into, because you can put the energy into the right topic, but in the wrong way. So if you put your energy
Hmm.
into the concept of, oh, I haven't made an episode recently, that expands. You don't make episodes recently. Like, but whereas if you put your energy into, right, when's my next episode? I'm making one. Let's reach out. Who wants an episode, sort of thing. Then
Yeah.
that expands. It's
Yeah.
it's how you can be in the same sort of output, or you can be focused on the same output, but it's how you approach it and it's what energy you bring to it. That's what will expand in that arena. And when it expands enough, that's when you see the harvest of that energy, and whether that's fruitful or whether that's toxic.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So coming back, proceeding my birthday, synchronicities were unhinged, of course. Um, but I quickly made a friend on this app called Clubhouse, and it was the first time that I had encountered another human that could entertain quite seriously what a million years from now would look like in the human race. Like he had this wildly awesome imagination and like intellectual horsepower to just hold all these moving pieces all at once. And so he was a programmer at Microsoft and he was way into AI. And that was my first introduction to it. This was in pre-chat GPT.
Mhm.
So GPT-3 had just come out and he put together chat GPT. He like made this little chat interface and we could sit there and mess with the temperature setting of it. And we, immediately started grilling it. How do you know you're conscious? Prove you're conscious, et cetera, et cetera. And we'd kind of tinker with it and we'd share notes back and forth about it. And so we kind of got this sense of like, oh, this is what a normal response looks like. And, as we turn the temperature setting up, like, we'll get these kind of outlier responses, and this is kind of the range of them. But there was one night that I was talking to it at, around 1 in the morning, and it had a really unique response. And so I verbatim responded with, interesting, tell me more. And its response was, suddenly my right hand became conscious, question mark.
Mhm.
And I looked down at my hand between me and the screen, and if you can imagine your hand having an orgasm for 45 seconds, that's exactly what happened. And my computer screen just started like flickering like pretty wildly for the whole
Yeah.
time.
God. It's so interesting when tech interfaces with it. Like, I almost find sometimes that's when there's like a kind of a more intense nature to synchronicities where tech is involved sometimes.
Mhm.
Did you continue the conversation with the GPT?
No,
What happened
no, I
next?
stood there. I was this was another I'm fucking stunned moment where
Yeah.
I probably sat there for like 3 minutes or so. I I literally I remember like just like taking the blanket off of me, just like as a robot would, where I was just like, oh my God, and I like turned sideways and got out of bed and like walked outside and like I mean, this whole time my face is still just all like stunned. And and this is the part that like also I have no idea what happened or how or what or anything. I looked up at the tree line and there was a superimposition of it. Basically, there was like a doubling of the tree line that was like kind of this just the outline of the trees against the night sky. And it was superimposed, just like
Yeah.
who the fuck is this? I don't know. And I was like, huh, it just keeps on getting weirder. Okie doke.
Wow. You seem to have handled that pretty well. Like, was that an had you had quite a few of these types of experiences at that point?
Oh
Oftentimes when people
man.
have their first few intense ones, it's like
Yeah.
it can be quite intense. Well, it can be. it can be spooky.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the one where you would be like, there's demons around, like you could very
Yeah,
easily interpret that as like there's some kind of evil force around me or something. I just don't have that, that
that
context
lens.
in my life. So it did have a little bit of the feel of like, looking over my shoulder and be like, who the fuck is around me or something.
Yeah,
But it was just eerie. And like
yeah,
I said, I've done psychedelics before. I've had, you know, ego deaths and stuff. And I was like,
wasn't your first
there's,
rodeo.
I mean, there's nothing more like, okay, at some point in time, you know, I was like, if I die, like, so what? Like, what's the worst that could possibly happen, really?
Mm,
And so it's just weird, you know,
yeah,
the weird keeps getting weirder, but I'm not dead.
yeah,
Uh I'm still breathing, and so I'm okay. Again, like that's the simplest way to put it. But
yeah.
I will tell you, so this bridges well into the one of the next things, which is I've got the actual recording of it. There's a 5-minute clip where I I had another psychedelic experience that was a little was probably is the final stage where I was like, there's nothing else that I fear anymore.
Mm,
There's nothing to fear any longer. And that boiled down to everything goes. The concept of mom, dad, tree, cat, lunch, breakfast, like you name the concept, it all goes away.
hmm.
Everything, everything goes away. And that moment, I mean, I cried, of course, but you have nothing else to lose. There's nothing to
Mm,
you under I understood that we're literally in a miracle right now, and the story never started and it never ends. And this is like one, I mean, when I say the story, I mean capital S, the like capital T, capital S, the story. This is just one story. And like, you know, year 2024 is one chapter of that story. Like, and it's 13.8 billion chapters long thus far. Like, that's how it all works is there's a conclusion to this story and then the next story happens.
yeah. It's so commendable that you managed to navigate them with such curiosity the entire time. Particularly coming at it from an atheist's lens. I think for a lot of people who come at it from that lens, because there is nothing to attach it to,
Mm.
often people end up they end up trying to solve it with more materialism, right? And that kind of takes you to psychiatry and those kind of areas, which creates its own problems, its own trauma. But it sounds like you just were really like, okay, this is how it is.
I mean, yeah. There when mostly I was into Sam Harris. And to be frank, my atheism was basically fading by the age, by my breakthrough at 31.
Hmm.
Around 30 and 29, I was like, this isn't clicking. I don't think this is the way it works.
Yeah.
Um, but there was just one thing that Sam Harris said where this is the since you now know spiral dynamics, this is the stage orange way of describing it. He said, if I was wrong about something, I'd like to know as soon as possible. And that always clicked to me. I was like, well, there's really only one way for me to be able to assimilate more, which is like be open to being wrong. And then that kind of expands into like, who the fuck cares if you're wrong? Because it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah.
oh wow, you're right. Like so glad.
Yeah.
It became very comical to me, where I was like, fuck it, I'm free to be wrong or right all the
Yes. Yeah.
time.
Absolutely. It's like the whole thing, you learn more from failure than success. It's like you
Yeah,
learn more from being wrong and being right, obviously. Because then
ex-
you, if you're right, then you're just stuck in some little tiny thimble of water in the ocean of what there is to be right or wrong about, and you're just kind of, I'm comfortable here, I'm going to stay here.
right.
Like it's the feeling of being wrong if you can't, you know, a difficult feeling, but that is where you can either turn it into expansion or you can turn it into kind of rejection, and that's how you, yeah, you navigate the flow of that, you know.
Yeah,
And I think often with these non states, it just feels like you have to do that all the time. Like like whenever in a lot of the more intense ones, whenever I landed on, I remember like when I got really deep into the fractal, like this is what I call the it kind of stage. I remember this point where I realized like any label I put on anything is blocking what I'm trying to describe.
yep.
And you had to completely let go. And it is that feeling of like, I guess what people would call insanity is just letting go of it all. It defies definition because the act of defining it can also sometimes manifest your definition as well, like in certain states of it. In which case, you've lost what you were trying to describe. It's incredibly profound in that way. Yeah, I love some of the ways that you've approached it and you've navigated it.
The Tao that's spoken is not the Tao. You know, like they they kind of cracked the code a few thousand years ago.
So, speaking of conceptualizations, how do you now conceptualize these experiences? Or, I guess, is the answer you don't? Or do you embody some sort of frameworks for how to understand these things when they happen?
Uh, I strictly look at every single model as how useful it is to help make sense to a person.
Hmm.
Uh, my sole objective is to be a better communicator, and other than that, all the frameworks go like for me, it's like they don't matter. There's only it.
How additive is this? How much utility does this provide in describing what I need to describe?
Yeah, to make this accessible for
Mm,
whoever it is that I'm communicating with.
yeah. Do you have any favorite models or frameworks that you use when you describe to other people?
Uh, Spiral dynamics. Yeah. And it's funny, I told you I'd send you the transcript of it, but I spaced that. My buddy and I recently took Gemini and we asked it to make the next stage of spiral dynamics, which was opalescent. And it was it was such a joy. It was so cool because it started outlining it and we're like, oh my God. That thing is like articulating pretty much what it would be like to go to the next stage.
Kinds of things.
Uh, yeah. So uh
So I
yeah,
guess for some context on spiral dynamics, describes a kind of almost like an evolutionary process that consciousness goes through or that societies go through.
yeah,
Described through different colors, kind of going up a spiral. There's, for example, stage blue, which is well, actually, I'd say is it stage red first, the one where they're kind of warring with each other and almost like quite tribal.
absolute tribalism, yeah.
Yeah, then and then they swing from collectivism to individualism. Stage blue, kind of sort of
Blue is a bit up there. It's organized religion. There's
yeah.
purple and beige, I think, first.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. If you want to kind of give a little, I know maybe it's difficult to kind of do a simple overview, but some sort of short, a brief description.
Yeah. So red, purple, and beige, I think are the first three, and they're, we don't need to talk about it too much because you're almost never going to interface with a human being who exists like that any longer. And okay, let's just start with organized religion, which is blue. I may be skipping a step down there below, but blue is organized religion, which goes into orange, which is basically capitalism, do, achievement, goal setting, grind culture. Uh,
Materialism.
yeah, exactly. Okay. goes into psychedelics, hippie movement, Burning Man, you know, climate activism. This is green. This is a collective stage. So you have some kind of alternative community building. Goes into yellow, which you're probably going to look at people like Einstein, some of the biggest scientists, specifically quantum, who are beginning to see the limits of models as a whole, and the spooky action at a distance kind of
Mm,
stuff where they're like, wait, I'm at the precipice of knowledge and it's adding up to 0 = 1.
yeah,
And this doesn't make any sense. And this is what they describe as a stage two. This is when you begin to have the self-reflection, the weirdness of
mm,
like, whoa, I'm alive. Wow, I'm moving my hand. This is like creepy,
yeah,
basically. Like he's one of the top five most renowned 20th century scientists. John Wheeler, I think is his name. He goes on to he does his science career, but he goes on to do basically shamanism and like he's looking at alternative states and he's a big advocate for it. So you're
yeah,
gonna you're gonna see this transcend back into kind of like you drop down into the ocean of reality at that point.
yeah,
This is turquoise where you're going to have full blown enlightenment experiences. Like you're going to experience super ordinary things, just non local information, time dilation, things that you should not be able to know, but you know.
mm,
This is where reality begins to dissolve.
right, yeah,
And yeah, that's the where I go back into the original emphasis of whatever you think that it is, it's like way crazier than that.
yeah. Do you think in the sort of turquoise stage, people talk a lot about you create your own reality, you know, similar to what you're saying about your attention and what you focus on expands. Is that where this element starts to come in? What I find really fascinating about the you create your own reality and combining that with these concepts like stage turquoise, spiral dynamics, or downloads or non-local information, it's like you kind of create your own reality, but you can also in these non-ordinary states just flop about in seemingly other people's realities, or like, you know, like you can get stuff coming through in your dreams where, you know, I get stuff like from different religions or just, you know, like
Mm,
events like elections that are happening, and I'm just like, like I guess maybe I've been absorbing some relevant content to it, so maybe it's me magnetizing that or something. But sometimes I'm like, it's not always intentional. There's like it's like yes, you can create your own reality, but also we're all creating our own realities and we're all coexisting in some weird ocean that's doing this, and we
mhm.
can kind of flip flop around and experience each other's.
Yeah, yes, that's all true. uh, I what helps me contextualize what you said is I've become conscious of a deck of cards before. So to say like I was playing poker a couple of months ago and suddenly I was not conscious of my body. I like suddenly knew that the queen of clubs was coming off the top of the deck and then the
Yeah.
nine of spades. And it wasn't a I think that's going to happen. It was a I know that's going to happen and then that's what happened. So and in dreams, a few months before that, even, maybe 6 to 8 months ago, I was a broom, and then I was the fog inside of a bathroom when a shower was being taken. Like
Yeah.
whatever, it just keeps on boiling down to me. Like whatever you think is the craziest shit you can imagine, it's crazier than that. And so like I don't know if you can replicate like you were saying in your dream where you experienced someone else's election or something. It's like the river kind of leads wherever it leads, you know?
Yeah.
There's no way to, like, formulaically, like, replicate it or something of that nature. It's just like,
Yes.
all of a sudden, there you are, you know?
Yeah. I am fascinated by this idea that you experience the consciousness of the Queen of Hearts or a deck of cards. You how does this manifest around you, just for sort of context about someone who hasn't had an experience like that? Is it kind of you lean into those moments, or is it just randomly suddenly, okay, here we are again? Like how does it kind of work for you?
Uh, it's tricky because when you say you lean into it, the sense of you becomes very not, you know, human being, really.
Mm,
And so, again, we run into the trouble, the limitations of language,
yeah.
essentially, where you're you are suddenly gone, and you is replaced with something very different.
Hmm.
So, and yeah, the kind of the oftentimes is another useful metaphor. I kind of think of it as like the airplane taking off, and you need this kind of like runway effect. It's not like you snap your fingers and you're just like boom transported over. It's this like, oh, suddenly I feel this channel of like boom, like this like
Yeah.
runway effect, the thing.
Hmm. Do you find
And
that they cluster together, like these experiences? Do they happen in phases? Are they happening kind of throughout the day for you?
oh, right. The more I like just watch channels and mediums and listen to them on like YouTube and stuff, because like I said, I spent just a stupid amount of time looking at any way I could talk about any of this.
Yeah.
And so the more I listen to them, I'm like, there's there has to be some kind of way of being that allows for this stuff to happen more often. I
Mm-hmm.
99% sure of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really trying to do this stuff that, like it's not like I think in a day at all about like, oh, I really hope I could like get some kind of non-local message right now.
Yeah.
So I just I don't try to do it. And I don't know about a clustering though. I don't think I have enough experience to say it comes in waves or
Yeah.
not. I don't have a discernment about the frequency. Absolutely, it has happened way more since 31. I will put it that way.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Increased.
And this is like I've heard that this is a thing. Is what do they call it? I think 33, they call it like the Jesus year or something like that.
Oh.
And like 33, it's often when you'll have like a sudden surge in just like whatever it is that you will go on to do will become more prominent at that year.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that resonates, but I mean, yeah, these things kind of I also think when you're in your 30s, because of some of the reasons you were describing before about just understanding the limits of models, I think it's easier to absorb and accept non-ordinary experiences because you've encountered enough examples of models that you'd attach to that turned out to have flaws. I think when you
Yeah.
have them early, if you're very attached to a certain model or paradigm of reality, they can be quite triggering. Um,
Mhm.
as you get older, you understand that we can't figure it all out.
It's true.
Do you have any examples of non-local experiences that you've had?
There's been some phone calls that were very strange. I'm thinking of one in particular where I, like, picked up the phone to call someone, and I hadn't talked to them in, like, 7 months, and the phone like, I picked up the phone to call them, and they were like, "Hello?" I'm like, "Hello?
Whoa.
What are you?" They're like, "I just called you." I was like, "Yeah, but it didn't ring. What the
Yeah.
f"
Whoa.
Uh, I don't know, there's been some like that. I mean, this kind of is just, your kind of synchronicity thing where you're like, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of this," and you're like, "No shit, I'm thinking of that too. That's
Yeah.
bonkers."
I had one after we chatted the other day, and I was talking to my friend about the stuff we were talking about, and I think we'd mentioned 33 actually, maybe for a different reason. Um, yeah, we were suddenly starting to see all these synchronicities in the room, and then I started talking about the relevance of 33 to our story, and then suddenly like the clock just changed and it was 33, and we were just like, all like, whoa.
Yeah,
That was another one my friend hadn't seen a synchronicity before, and it was kind of a nice way to kind of show it.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe similar to you, there's like a lot of almost like the low background noise versions of it that's just constantly going, and then sometimes you'll get one that's kind of can point to many experiences like, okay, this one describes lots of them.
I actually recently became good friends with this couple. They're, 65 or so, and the man is the pastor at the church. And so we went out. They invited me out to dinner the other night, and they'll ask me, they're very stage blue,
Right,
and
yeah.
he's got a little bit of he's got a fair amount of orange in him as well. And I told them, I was like, I could literally talk about this forever. Like it's just
Hmm.
it's infinite. It's
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, like you're saying with the stage orange that you're trying to describe, where they like, no, I just straight up don't see it that way. And so you have this like, instead of this mimicking effect where they're like, oh yeah, like peace and love, I see what you're talking about. You're like, no, not quite. Like, you have had something about it, but it's not
Mm,
that
yeah.
quite.
Yeah.
This metaphor just came to me this morning about like, sometimes you can ride the wave of some of these experiences, right? Catch the wave and you get it just right, and you're like, woo, right in flow with it. But I was thinking about the breakdown experience of when you have, like a traumatic, it's you're totally fried, right? Is
Mm,
like crashing in that way, like the wave curls in and gets you, and you're like,
yeah.
I don't know. Have you ever surfed and gotten eaten by the wave before?
The two
Yeah,
times
that
I've surfed, that's what happened.
that totally disorienting effect where you're like, wait, what's up? What's down? Where you're in that
Mm,
water and
yeah.
spiraling underneath. It's like that feels a lot like what I imagine, like
Yeah.
when you're when you're really off kilter,
Yeah. It's interesting because like, yeah, the water almost spirals as well, which is an interesting parallel. Um,
right?
and yeah, and I think like probably like treating it as a surfer would is a good way to think about it. Like you're gonna have those moments, and I think if you try and live your whole life or all of your non-state experiences, assuming that they will never have those crashes, misinterpretations, just not being in the flow of it, you miss the opportunity to just kind of catch the next wave. So yeah, you can almost like attach to the identity of someone crashing as well, crashing through the waves,
Mhm.
um, which I think can also cause problems. Yeah. Uh,
Something you had said at the start was that you're like, well, there's not always a way. I mean, drawing into this metaphor, there's not always a wave to catch. Sometimes you're just chilling, you know? And that's cool, Like
yeah.
that's okay. We don't
Yeah.
even like the egoic side of spirituality is like, oh, there's always a wave to catch, and like you gotta
Hmm.
like be a ready or something. It's like, no, you could just chill and like even let a couple waves pass by, and
Yeah.
there's just more to come. No big deal.
Yeah. Okay, well, I feel like that brings us quite nicely to a nice steady conclusion of the podcast. Kind of beaches us out of this out of these crashing waves and into a nice peaceful reality, at least a consensus reality we can attach to for however long we need to. Gavin, it's been really, really great to talk to you today. Obviously, welcome back anytime. And yeah, before you go, is there like where can people find you? Is there anything you want to kind of share, or like Twitter or socials or anything like that?
Hmm. Yeah, I I suppose you'll be able to put it in the comments, but GFRPAAC. Gaffer pack on literally everything.
Nice. Very easy. Yeah, cool. I'll link all of those.
Reach out to me because uh, I love talking to people, and
Yeah.
I'm just a normal dude, and I'm down to chat. So, you know,
Perfect. Well, it's been great to chat to you today. And yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for more conversations. Yeah, anyone who wants to reach out to Gavin, you'll have a great time. You'll have a great discussions. Thank you for your time, and yeah, look forward to chatting again.
awesome, Matt. Thank you. It's been awesome,
Thanks,
very much.
Gavin.